I am very excited to have Dr. Jude Currivan here with us. And I've always really been impressed with Dr. Currivan. I had the honor of meeting her in person in London twice now.
Mhm.
And it's not only her knowledge, it's also her presence that stands out, and her loving way of being with people. And I can't say anything else. But that word, it really is true. And so that beauty and that presence then culminates in this incredible intelligence. And we just had these great conversations, and they kept on going and going and going. She was a part of our symposium in London, the Sophia University, that was part of the global conference. And that was the first time that, we touched base really, and that I listened to a whole lecture of hers. And it is mind blowing. So I encourage all of you to listen to the movie, not just once or twice, but maybe a few times, because um, there's this wisdom that is woven into it. And it's not just it's not how to explain. It is like, unless you go and you study physics and you study all of these things and you go and you get your master or your doctorate in this, you're probably going to find it like, whoa, she just dropped a few things here that are major thoughts, and also revolutionary in the way she's proposing it. And we'll go into that, but I just want to say that before launching into this, because I think we take it for granted. We tend to listen to things in a certain way nowadays, and it's just like, oh yeah, there it is. And whoa, no, this was actually something more. And then you can go and look it up, like, theory of black holes, like what's going on there, why hologram, and, what do you mean by breadth of the universe, right? So all of these questions come up. So I am going to introduce her again in a way. I'm not sure what Chris said, but because her life journey is really truly transformative in itself. So she bridges this science, spirituality, business, and global leadership, all of these things. So she had a childhood that was, not rooted in science and, intellectual exploration or spiritual insights necessarily, but really grounded you know, in the earth, I want to say. So I believe that you grew up in the north of England, right, Jude? You could just say, yeah, and that your dad was a coal miner and you came from a family of coal miners.
Mhm.
And so this is a really grounded connection to the human experience and to the earth. And so from here, she then, I mean, she also went to Oxford, but she was also a businesswoman, and she also did finance and, two major international businesses. So this is why it's really this ability to see beyond, these subject matters that are usually kept separate. And this is what we really try to expand on at Sophia. And it certainly is, I want to say, something I aspire to is to really, how do we connect all of these spaces together? So she did all that. So then she was, she journeyed to 80 countries, and then she interacted with wisdom keepers from different traditions. She's immersed herself in the knowledge also of sacred landscapes. And from an early age, she has been able to experience all these multidimensional realities, which I think you kind of use the intellectual to go figure out what had happened. Like, why is this way? Um, and wow. So academically, Jude holds a master's degree in physics from Oxford, specializing in cosmology and quantum physics, PhD archaeology, and she's woven all of these profound scientific, insights with universal wisdom teachings. That is so important, right? The science and the wisdom, the integration, the holistic worldview. And then, of course, coming from there, also part of our topic today is how do we actionably, like, or bring that into the world. So this sustainable solutions, that we don't stop at sustainability is just surviving, but really this idea of regeneration with the global challenges we face today, crucial, right? So business is crucial in all of this because business builds, and we want to make sure that it builds and it doesn't disintegrate things. She's also an author of 7 nonfiction books, and then the movie, 16 languages, 26 countries. It's about the cosmos. It's about the hologram. It's about Gaia. And so trilogy, and there's more coming, I believe, right? Like there's another book coming now. And so she's won awards. She's been she's been a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle along on Deepak Chopra, Gene Houston, etc. I can go on and on. She's co-founder of Whole Worldview, and I think this whole worldview that you've founded is really a way it's like a vehicle to bring this unity awareness, this opportunity for profound transformation for all of us, into a platform and organize it. And so she works with communities, with organizations worldwide, including the United Nations. She's been there and she's talked there, and her motto I love, which was close to the global conference, is act local, feel global, think cosmic. We didn't have that cosmic bit for the global conference. We're focusing on global and local, and bringing the two together. And you're right, we need to add this think cosmic part of it. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jude Currivan, cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist, and pioneer. Hello.
Hello, Dorot. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be with you all.
Yeah, so big breath on that. Is there something that you would like to add from that, bit of story I gave about you, your background, your ability to be between spaces and unite them, bring them together?
I suppose the common thread is my curiosity. When I was very, very little, my main word was why. And growing up in the circumstances that you mentioned, a coal mining family in the north of England, was not a well-educated environment, but but more importantly, it was a loving environment, and it was a supportive environment. So that I was a very strange child and very curious child, I still felt loved and supported in that curiosity. And so I was able to go on this lifelong journey because I never felt limited by my questions. And so it's been a journey of very many paths. You know, in English, we talk about a scenic route, which is not a direct route. It's the
Mhm.
one that sort of goes up mountains and through valleys and around. It's had very many aspects to the path. But what I realize now is that when I look back, all those paths led to this point where I can share, I can support, I can invite, I hope I can welcome many, many others to this path, because what the film's about is who we really are. We've, in a way, with our sort of, worldviews, so often we shut ourselves down. And I've never shut myself down. And so that curiosity has always, invited me onwards. Even now, I'm as curious now as I think I was when I was 4 years old. And there's so much more to learn, to discover, to experience. So that's really been the constant in my life. A life of many challenges, as all we all have, but a life that feels that it was the path I was meant to be on. And I'm glad I am.
Yeah, it brings out something. I mean, for our listeners, abroad, it just the cultural meaning of that, it's quite extraordinary to be able to go to Oxford, you know, anyways. But coming from that type of background, it's incredibly challenging. So I just want to, really appreciate you for there was a certain amount of resilience and strength in there for you to be able to surmount all of these yeah, obstacles, because there are obstacles. I mean, it's really something profound that you were able to do that. And I I suspect that there's also this internal, yes, the curiosity, but also an internal, I don't know, is it drive? Is it, what is it that where you went like, oh no, okay, I'm coming back. So with my innovative ideas, I'm sensing there's something here. And I think for our listeners, this is important too, because we talk about innovation and creativity a lot at
Yeah,
Sophia. And that means that you are outside of the norm.
yeah.
Inevitably, it puts you outside of the norm. And so you will be challenging the status quo with whatever you're doing. And that's not always easy.
No, it isn't easy, but I'd suggest a slightly different reframing of that.
Okay.
Um, Couple of things. First of all, my dad was a coal miner, but he died when I was 10 years old,
Mm.
and my younger brother was 7. So my mum brought us up as a single mom, as a widow from that point onwards. And she was my role model in terms of resilience. You talk about resilience. I mean, my
Oh,
mum
yeah.
was
Mm.
extraordinarily and so loving and so wise and so resilient. So that was one thing that I was blessed with. And it's something in me. And I come from a long line of resilient women, primarily wonderful men, but very resilient women in those sort of environments. So that was a great start in that regard. The other thing is I've never felt I've challenged the status quo. There's a wonderful quote or perspective of Buckminster Fuller. And
Mhm.
Bucky Fuller, I think, talked about instead of trying to challenge what is there,
Mhm.
sing a better song, create something that's better. And then people want to come to that better song. They want to sing it. They will want to play with it. They will. So when I talk about innovation and creativity, there's no sense of challenge at all. It's about, again, curiosity, excitement, joy, passion. And I described those as my energetics rather than drive. It was never a drive to do something. It was always a sense of the joy where that curiosity led me. And I suspect for a lot of the folks with us,
Mhm.
That's probably their middle name as well, curiosity, because that leads to creativity, it leads to innovation, but not to challenge something, but to create something maybe that's never been created before.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I guess I'm also thinking, because I was having some of the conversations with students this past week, and some of them, were maybe in that spot where like questioning themselves too. It's like, oh, this is so edgy. Like, is it even true? Can I, like, the self doubt?
Yeah,
And should I then, like, everybody's asking or questioning me in a way where I'm questioning myself too, is it really that's so edgy, it's innovative, but maybe I've gone over the edge.
maybe you have. And
I love it.
and
Yeah. I mean, that's what I say too, but so yes. So they're coming back. You're
Mm,
You're so maybe then drive is a rephrase of expansion. Maybe this
mhm,
expanding,
mm,
emerging, and then
mm.
restfulness in that, which is really like also a Taoist way of approaching the universe.
It's a
And
very
mhm,
Taoist woman. And I
yeah.
so honor the Tao. That is such a profound wisdom teaching, life teaching, soul teaching way. And you flow with the Tao. You don't try and pose yourself on the Tao. You flow with it. And that's the beauty of when I co-produce a radical guide to reality, is this incredible evolutionary impulse that flows through our entire universe. And so for me, it's about how do I attune with that flow? How do I align with that flow? And so much has been expanded because I've been willing to go over the edge. I've been willing to actually flow where the Tao has flowed me. And then we
Yeah.
can relax because we can trust in the Tao, we can trust in the path.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, that came to me when I was watching the movie, that there's really, this is also an exploration of, the quantum physics of the Tao. Hey,
Exactly.
how could this like come together? What could be one explanation? And then, for those listeners who are focused on business, like, how do we then take this, because a cosmology means that this is the way we're influenced in our worldview, and it doesn't stop there. I mean, the action comes from that place,
Yeah,
right? So now how do I
that's
bring this into the world?
and that is the point. Our worldview, the way we see the world, is the lens through which we make our choices, our decisions, the way we behave. And I'm working with a lot of folks who are trying to help people in what's called burnout. They're so stressed, they just cannot go on. And when you come to the root cause of that, often is this perception of separation. So they're having to either do something, lift something that they feel is too heavy, they feel burdened, they feel anxious, they feel stressed. When you actually help them to take a breath, actually, to really understand that they are held, they are innately meaningful beings in a meaningful universe that is benevolent, and they're not separate. There is, separation is an illusion, as this film talks to. And that's not just my ideas, that's not just the Tao, which says that exactly. We also now have all the scientific evidence, to the extent that the Nobel Prize for Physics was given in 2022 to researchers who showed experimentally that our entire universe is whole, that its
Right.
wholeness is expressed through every aspect of its being, but that we literally are inseparable. And so when we understand that, and yet we're unique, so there's a whole settling into a realization that we are meaningful. Just by being, we are meaningful, we are purposeful, and we belong. Just that settling in, just that feeling of a sense of safety and that knowingness can change so much. And then from that beingness, we can, the doingness can come, but it comes from a much more resilient place. It comes from a more peaceful place, a more joyful place, a more loving place, and therefore a more effective place.
Oh, yes. Yes, because, you're aligning with what needs to be done versus, what maybe your viewpoint or your will is. Um, so I think that was beautiful. I mean, it's like explaining why cosmology is important. And so a lot of times, like, people will ask, like, you know, what is a cosmologist? I mean, like, what do they do? So do you want to explain? Like, let's go. Why they call it cosmologists and what is their function?
Well, cosmology is a study of the whole cosmos, so everything. But most cosmologists are coming from a materialist worldview. So they're
Mhm.
looking at the physical universe. And what they're now realizing is we cannot, as scientists, we cannot explain the appearance of our universe, its energy and matter, and its space time, without delving deeper to levels that are not physically manifest, that the appearance of our universe emerges from these deeper levels. I would say virtually all cosmologists now are on this direction of travel because the
Interesting.
science is showing it, the evidence is showing. So a cosmologist really, at its broadest sense, and for me, coming from a perspective that mind, universal mind and consciousness aren't what we have, either human consciousness nor universal consciousness, but literally what we and the whole world are. By coming from that perspective, we embrace the Tao, we embrace universal wisdom teachings, all of which have said this. We embrace indigenous teachings, which say we are all part of the web of life. And therefore, the old paradigm of science is being turned on its head because the evidence is showing that it's too limited, and it's now realizing that we have to bring all this together. And this is what the film's about, this is what I write about, this is what I share. And you ask about, so what does it matter? Well, we're finding the evidence is at every scale, from the tiniest to the whole universe. So it's at the scale of our everyday lives. It's showing that the meaningful underlying patterns of information that then get expressed as energy, matter, and space-time. We are those patterns. We
Mm.
are those patterns. So our intelligence, our being emerges from those deeper realms. We could call them spiritual realms. We could call them other realms of consciousness. But the reality is that the Dorot who's sitting here, the Jude that's sitting here, is essentially an emergence of something that is profoundly more deeper, profoundly deeper in our beingness. And so it matters to each and every one of us, because this is who we are. This is who we are. And what this is showing us to is this is who we can evolve to become. Because if we awaken to this understanding, as I mentioned, our choices change, our worldview changes, it is transformed. And so our choices are transformed. So our behaviors are transformed. So our structures, our organizations, our way of educating our young ones, wealth, healthy living, everything is affected by this. It's
Mhm.
not out there or tiny, it's all of it. And vitally, it's all of us. That's why it matters.
Yeah, thank you. I think also what's come to the fore more and more now is systems thinking, right? And systems theory, and whether we put that into organizational psychology or you work with that, from physics perspective, or what that is what you're addressing, really. You're saying,
Absolutely.
you know, this is the physics. So physics also at its base level, I mean, just looking at these terms, right? So physics is the explanation of the rules of materiality, like where
Yes.
we are now. These are, you know, the rule number one, there's time and space, you know, and then we go on and on and on. Um, and what the rich part of quantum, you know, has been to like introduce that, you know, it's more than that. It's more complex than that, and we can have several streams at the same time, which now they actually use that in computing, right? So it's like quantum computing, and so everything is moving into the systems direction. And so the cosmology is like bringing in that piece that is the foundation of the worldview,
It is. I
where it's
mean,
all
are you
maybe
yeah.
other way around, right? Like it's like starting to like all happen at the same time.
It is emergent. You're absolutely right. And you know, in a way, our universe is the biggest system. Our universe as a finite being, an entity, a unitive entity that, you know, meaningfully exists, purposefully evolves as a unitive entity, is the biggest system, a multidimensional, I would say, because it's innately spiritual in the sense that there are other dimensions that then from which emerge the appearance of one level, the appearance of our universe, physical universe. So that's the biggest system. And the physics is the rules, the principles by which our universe can meaningfully exist and purposefully evolve. Our universe essentially is in right relationship. Everything is interdependent with the whole. Yeah. So in that sense, the physics is often called the parent of the other sciences because it lays the ground rules. It lays the rules of the dance, the rules of the game. And from that, everything can emerge, whether it's chemistry, whether it's biology. And so all systems thinking is trying to look at a system as its whole and how its whole then is expressed in its parts. Whereas the old paradigm of science was reductionist. It took something apart and looked at the pieces. But the problem is when you do that, you miss out the bridges, you miss out the gaps, you miss out the relationships that take one level to a more complex level, to a more complex level, to a more complex level. So yes, systems thinking, but I would suggest that even systems thinking is still at a very early stage of really understanding the fundamental wholeness and how that plays out throughout our universe. So I think we're in really exciting times, but you cannot ultimately have systems thinking without consciousness thinking, without spiritual
Oh,
thinking.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and maybe that's a better term then, you know, it's consciousness thinking. I like that. I mean, I'm just looking at things like, you know, at Google, they're working on the microchips to go into the quantum computer, which essentially doesn't deal with zeros and ones anymore. They're on this all of these things happening in computing all at the same time. And that's a consciousness-based approach to computing. So now it can get pretty mind-blowing, you know, and people don't quite understand where does this even come from? So I feel that what you're offering, this cosmology, this like going and like taking a step back and saying, well, what is happening? This is what's happening. It's based on this view of how the world emerged, which is our narrative, right? So we have several narratives in the world, quite a few,
We do
of
indeed.
how
We
the
do
world
indeed.
was created, right? And um, do you feel like a particular resonance with the narrative that you're bringing forth, that you're gifting with any particular wisdom traditions, or is there any resonance with a particular story for you?
Mhm. I would say many. I mean, when I was very young, in addition to sort of having experiences, direct experiences that were going beyond the physical realm and experiencing those as natural, which they indeed are, I was also very, very interested in quantum physics and science and cosmology from very early age, and astronomy, but also wisdom teachings. And the wisdom teachings that spoke to me so powerfully were those of China, so the Tao, those of ancient India, so the Gita, the
Mhm.
Upanishads, and those of ancient Egypt, and finally indigenous teachings. I've had the great pleasure and privilege of spending a lot of time with indigenous teachings and teachers and communities. So for me, when you go down into the depths of all of those understandings, it's pretty much the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. And so for me, it wasn't one or the other. The joy was, they're all saying pretty much the same thing. And they're all saying that consciousness, universal consciousness, and human consciousness as a microcosm of universal consciousness is foundational. And it's from that foundation that the appearance of the world emerges. So I experienced that and had been taught that from universal wisdom teachings way before the evidence, the scientific evidence really came forward. Because when I was at Oxford, they were teaching me quantum physics, they were teaching me relativity physics, but they were still coming from a materialist worldview.
Mm,
Pretty much, not everyone, but pretty much. Certainly that was what I was taught in lectures. And now that's been turned completely on its head. Quantum physics gave some early clues, as did relativity physics, but now we're so much further on, and we needed the holographic understanding. We needed the understanding of meaningful information, what that actually is, and realizing that that's the way in which cosmic mind can create a world that we call our universe. In its simplest way, it really is the simplest way that our universe could come into being and then journey along its path from simplicity to complexity.
Yeah, I feel like this is really important, this background, right? So because I know that some of our pragmatic viewers and listeners are, you know, their question is going to be, okay, well, how is this relevant to what I do in my life, right? So if I am engaged in business, if I am a psychotherapist, how is this relevant in my life? And yet, if we take that minute to stop and breathe, um, this is the what we're standing on. Like
Yeah.
where, so that's why I really wanted to dive more into that, and maybe we'll come back to it and we'll take a little trip into, how you see now in your role as futurist. Um, if we stand on that ground that you're proposing, which is revolutionary in itself. So if you sit with it a little bit, you go like, woohoo, revolutionary. Um, then how does that affect our future moving forward in that pragmatic way? What are our opportunities?
Okay. Well, I think probably the most pragmatic thing we do is decide whether we are in conflict with each other or at peace with each other. I mean, pretty much everything else pales before going to war or going to
Mm.
peace. And if we have a worldview of separation, then actually conflict is natural, because I'm separate from you. You don't look like me. You probably don't think like me. That worries me, because what could you do? Can I trust you? Maybe not. We've got a whole history and story, her story, of seeing others as others. rather than seeing them as part of an inseparable world. They're different, yes, they're unique, yes, but they're differentiated, yes. Otherwise we'd be all gloopy and together. The beauty of our universe is its unity is expressed in huge diversity. Every person walking our beloved planetary home is unique, and yet we're all part of the human family. What many people don't realize is there's more genetic variety amongst a family of chimpanzees on a mountainside in Rwanda than across our entire 8 million human souls. Yeah. And yet we've got a worldview that says we're separate. We've got a worldview. And so what that means is our organizations, our structures, the way we are, way we behave comes from that perspective. And so we go to war. We go to war because we either see others as somehow we're fearful of them, or we want to dominate them, and we do the same to our planetary home. We exploit, we extract, we degrade. All of that perspective, all of that view, that worldview has brought us to this point of meta-crisis. And yet, it's a moment when we are waking up, and the film's a tiny part of that, but we're waking up to literally remember that we are part of not just a human family, a global human family, but a universal communities of families and life. Now, the point of that is, if a worldview of separation, in a worldview of separation, conflict is natural. In a worldview of wholeness, peace is natural. We may, of course, will differ, of course, we'll disagree, but we can find ways of doing so that are peaceful, that are civil, that honor the other, that is the reflection of ourselves. Instead of something to be derided or demeaned or dehumanized. That is what I'm talking about. And that's why this is so important. This message.
Thank you, Jude. I think your the connection wasn't so great there for a moment. But yeah, so we got that. So I want to dig into that, because say that we just accept this premise, right? And we're able to engage in different activities, whether it is therapy or whether it is being active in business and building a business, right? So we talked about, what is like a regenerative economy? What does it even mean? And so maybe it would be great if you could explain from your perspective what the core principles of that are, and how you see that um being like an ultimate growth, or wherever you want to take that. I don't want to like lead you into it, but I mean, obviously it's obvious what I think, but okay. Yeah, there you go. Leave it as a
There I go. I'm
question.
not sure where I'm going, Dor.
Yeah.
What are you asking me about regenerative economics?
Yes, so what are the core principles of that, right? Because we've been talking about the base,
Mhm,
of your
mhm.
cosmology, and then the future of what you could see, for humanity being built by it. And so now we're going into the level underneath it. Well, what does it mean? So if we work with regenerative economics versus sustainability, like what is the
Yeah.
difference for you? And what are then the core principles? And of course, how does it relate to everything else? But let's take it step by step because these are mouthfuls.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think you mentioned earlier about sustainability. Sustainability is sustaining what is there currently. And we don't want to sustain what's there currently because we're in a meta crisis. We're in potentially a survival mode. What I would suggest is we consider, first of all, I think on a bigger basis, not just economics, we could reframe our meta crisis to a metamorphosis. In metamorphosis, where a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly,
Mhm,
it's an evolutionary journey. It's an evolutionary potential playing out. So if we
mhm,
reframe our metacrisis to a metamorphosis for the humanity and our relationship with our planetary home, we can reframe everything that we do. Because, if we are a caterpillar species, which we have been, where we have exploited, where we have perceived the world as separate, we behaved accordingly. Bear with me,
you
Dora. I'm just being guided to stop my video to hopefully
oh,
improve my
oh, the
internet. Is that?
sound. Yeah.
Yeah, I was told to turn off my video if that's easier. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so if you can hear me, so instead of
Yes, we can hear you.
sustainability, regeneration is about restoring, but it also is more than that. I work very closely with a gentleman called John Fullerton, who is one of the pioneers of regenerative economics. And John talks about 8 principles of regenerative economics. And what I'll do after our call, I'll send you the link because I feel that our listeners could really find his work very helpful. But what he talks about is regenerative economics is the economics of healthy living systems. And by a living system, he means the whole of our planetary home. So he's not just talking about biological organisms, he's talking about the whole planet that he and I both refer to as Gaia. And so in regenerative economics, you're actually aligning the economics with how Gaia has been able to support the evolution of life for over 4 billion years. So at the heart of regenerative economics is what's called right relationship. In other words, not a win-lose situation, but a win-win situation. How can we come together in all our economics to support healthy life, to support a healthy planet, to support a healthy human family? So that
Mhm.
means, it means mutuality, it means honoring, it means respect, it means love, it means caring. And then, I'm a gardener, so I'm a regenerative I'm a regenerative economist through nurturing my garden and therefore working with its seasons, working with its time, honoring, looking after the soil, nurturing the plants, ensuring that things are in balance. It's all of those things. We could go into more depth on this, but it's bringing that awareness of what is health. What is health in whether it's an organization or a society or it's a person? What is health? And go from there, because a healthy system and a healthy economy is a regenerative economy by its very nature.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and ours is not. John and I are working on a piece of writing at the moment where we're working with this view of metamorphosis, and evolutionary potential for our human family. And so we're saying that the current economic system is like our identity, and the current and the financial system currently is its immune system, because the immune system is there to protect the identity. And both the immune system of the finance and the identity of the economy are both diseased. They're both unhealthy. And so the financial flows that are the circulation of that identity themselves are unhealthy. So nothing is healthy, nor the identity, which is the economic system itself, nor the financial system, which is its immune system, nor the financial flows, which is its circulatory system. None of those are healthy. So what do we do to return to health, or to move forward into health? And that is really living a better lifestyle as a human species. And that means that we care for each other and we care for our planetary home.
Yes, well said. And I'm thinking it would be great to maybe take that apart some more, and go granular in in the way we approach things. I think maybe it is on a simplified note, just balance, right? Like keeping
Mm-hmm.
balance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then what do you think would be some practical examples of these systems being implemented successfully now somewhere in the world? Do you have anything that comes to mind in terms of
Oh,
regenerative economics? Is anybody doing this?
yeah, they are. And one of the things that we've been doing, John and I have been doing, is convening a whole group of economists who are coming from this regenerative economics. I'd say unitive economics, because it's actually grounded on this understanding, this cosmology of unity. And what we're doing is we're supporting and involving and inviting examples around the world. So, for example, there's an amazing cooperative called Mondragon in Spain. And this has been going since 1948. And it is many, 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 many organizations and communities now. But they really are modeling what a regenerative economy looks like, because it's not just an economy, it's the health of the community. It's the health of the community's environment, and it's not that separation of people and planet. It's that co-creative, cooperative mutuality. And they've not just survived over, since 1948, they have thrived, they have grown, and they have, these principles that John teaches in his Capital Institute work are very much being played out in Mondragon. There is also now a lot of work being done on bioregional regenerative economics. In other words, instead of sort of putting lines on maps arbitrarily and often artificially, economists are looking at a whole bioregion, for example, a river system, and looking at it in its wholeness. And that then you were talking about systems, systems modeling. It's a much, much more effective modeling, because you're doing the natural modeling of, for example, a valley or a river system, or whatever it may be. And so a lot of regenerative economics now is focusing on the principles, which are universal principles. They're principles of physics. They're the principles that I write about as a cosmologist, but they play out then in planetary, for planet and people. They're the same principles. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier: mutuality, balance, as you mentioned, right relationship, win-win, collaboration, cooperation. The way that Gaia's evolutionary progress has continued for 4 billion years, every time there's a leap forward into higher levels of complexity, there has been cooperation, whether it's within a single-celled bacterium that's then, had a symbiotic relationship with another, and therefore moving into multi-cells, moving into more and more complex biological organisms, but also in cooperation and collaboration throughout Gaia's entirety, her rocks, her minerals, her waters, her air, which is what the film talks about. In that entirety, that's how our planetary home has managed to nurture ever greater levels of complexity and individuated self-awareness throughout that long story. And that's the story of our universe.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is it's something that we really need at the moment, and for because of resource depletion, and because I think the leading economies are going to go more and more into that, because we have to. No
We
choice,
have to,
right?
but this often, we do have to. And so in a way, it's a push, but it's also a pull, in the sense that I think this is an invitation by the universe to literally grow up, to wake up to this realization of who we really are, because then we can, we can hopefully heal the traumas of that worldview of separation and all that's brought with it. Not judging, but just realizing we cannot live like that anymore. And so we can grow up to thrive and to consciously evolve through this realization and bringing it into our lived experience. It's not just to understand this, but to live it, to be it, to play it out in our lives every day.
So, I want to ask you one more question in that direction, and then I'm going to take a whole host of questions from the audience that are all pretty complex. Uh, so, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question around this, this system that you see for us, for prosperity and for growth in the future, for us earthlings. um so what role do then businesses and corporations play in the transition to a regenerative economic model? Like, so what could that look like, for a business, if you decide, I want to support this, I want this, I want to support this way of growth, or I want to support, in therapy, the people who are dealing with the challenges out there in this very awkward transition period.
Yes, I mean, I'd sort of have a response to each of those, because I feel that anyone who's working in therapy, to understand this from their own perspective as well, is to invite, in whatever way they're teaching, their therapies, is to invite people to realize that much of their own trauma is caused by separation or perception of separation. And I worked in therapy for many years, and psychospiritual therapy. And it's an invitation for people, first of all, to acknowledge that they do feel trauma, that there is, that in their lives, and then a healing journey of that. And that healing journey is from often profound loneliness to a more empowered aloneness, to this understanding of all oneness, where each and every one is unique. So to appreciate the uniqueness for each of us, to not think that we're somehow wrong or different, but we all belong. We all belong. So to find that wholeness within ourselves, and that's where I think therapists can be incredibly important, to help people on that journey to a homecoming to who they really are, and realize that uniqueness of who they are within the inseparability, within the wholeness of all of this. So that's therapy. I think for businesses, businesses are, they can be the innovators. Governments tend to fall behind. But if you can have if you have cooperation and collaboration and co-creation with as many folks as want to do this, then you can synergize efforts. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing it with so many groups of people, link up together, lift up together from this perspective. And the synergies that can come forward are truly, can be incredibly positive. Can't do it on
Yes,
your own.
yes. Yes, yes. Yeah, that's it's a good reminder to, say, okay, synergies, it's partnerships, it's,
Absolutely.
moving and when you're moving in a space in a business and there is this awkward thing. So of course, like what you were addressing too is this individual, who is working in all of this. There's a lot of stresses and this in this period because there is so much change, there's so much transformation, there's so much of the unknown, and people are not used to like working in that necessarily because it's all it's all in flux. And then so bringing that into the individual, being able and supporting the individual, so that would
Yeah.
be therapy, and then coaching at work so that then
Mhm.
these individuals are able within organizations and within corporations and companies, are able to go and find these synergies and these partnerships, and also what you were mentioning, this bioregional aspect of going into like where does it make sense from a a business perspective, or where does it make sense from a building perspective, wherever you're wherever you're active
Mhm.
in the world. I
Yeah.
mean I think we've gotten snowed in with the questions here. So I think we're gonna have to just answer some of them. Let's see. Uh, Dude, thank you so much. I mean, it is such a rich place to dance, and also, to remember how can we as individuals then contribute to all of this, policies, frameworks, businesses, therapists. There is such a need, for support out there. So,
The, there is.
yes,
Can I just add one more
yes.
point before we open to questions?
Oh, absolutely.
I guess it, for me, it's always asking what is mine to do, because sometimes it can seem that there's so much to do that, of course, nobody can do it all. Nobody has all the ideas. Nobody. This is why I emphasize linking up and lifting up together, as you were saying, with the synergies, with the co-creative opportunities for this. But I come back to what is, I ask myself each day, what is mine to do today? Not next year or the year after that, because I don't know where we're going in all of this. But if I can make the best, wisest decision today based on two things: what is mine to do, and how can I best serve the good of the whole? Those two questions every day. And then make my decisions and choices and act accordingly. And always from love, always from love.
Hmm. Thank you, Jude. Yes, that is excellent guidance there. And they want to see you again. We think that your internet is stable now. If you want to open up your camera again, and we'll try it because
Okay,
it'd be nice
I
to
think I have, but I'm not seeing myself at the moment.
know. And they just asked me if you could switch your
I think
camera,
I,
your video
yeah,
back on.
I thought I had.
I just see your picture.
Yeah.
But
At the
okay,
moment
no
I've set,
worries.
yeah,
No.
okay. At the moment I've sort of put my video on and my light is on, but I can't see me. Oh, maybe.
Oh, you're okay.
I think I might be on the way.
That is, yes, I think you might be on the way. So, thank you, Jude. Here is, what message would you like to leave with leaders who want to make meaningful contributions to global sustainability? I think you just did that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that covers it, except with one thing. I would always invite everyone. You know, I was in business, as you know as well. I always put people first. I always put people first, because I know that if I put people first, if I come together as a team rather than a hierarchy, if I truly invite the voices that I work with into that co-creative effort, that always produce the best outcomes, always. And then the whatever the profits, whatever else flowed. But by doing that, by honoring each and every person, empowering each person, helping them to realize that they have meaning and purpose and belong, welcoming that in and co-creating together, innovating together, working together from that perspective, I know from my own experience, always, always, always produce the best outcomes.
Yes, it goes back to your movie too, and how, you know, you really stress this, like, that we are that, you know, it's not like over there. We
No,
are the
we
mind
are
of the
there.
universe. We are the consciousness of the universe. So it makes perfect sense that you would engage in the humanness
Yes.
element.
And,
Like,
and
what
the
else are you going to
human,
get engage in, right?
well, exactly. I would say, and our planetary home. So there is something called the golden rule: treat others, and
Uh-huh.
I would add, and our planetary home as you would wish to be treated. It's the golden rule, but I'd add our planetary home, because sometimes it just stops at human beings.
Yes.
It can't stop at human beings.
Yes, and because we forget that that's the organic matter, right? Like, we are that, but we are our home, but we forget that because we see it as other. So we're back at that reinforcing, seeing the
Exactly.
movie a few times.
And feel it, you know, feel it here,
Yeah.
feel it in our hearts. That's what I would invite.
So, okay, so that was that question. What role do bioregional initiatives play in addressing global sustainability change challenges?
I think
I
they're the
think,
most I think they're the most effective. I think they're most sensible. I mean, we know that, you know, over many years, we've made maps of nations and smaller, you know, sections, but often they're arbitrary. They don't follow Gaia's natural flows. Whereas bioregions, which of course are more than the biological organizations in those regions, they're the soils, they're the rivers, the waters, they're the you know, the way the landscape is. Bringing all of that in, because that's the way Gaia operates. That's the way she maintains health over, you know, 4 billion years. That's the way she does it. And so to understand bioregionally
yeah,
is to have that more natural systems approach, rather than arbitrarily stopping at a certain point just because we've
yeah,
decided to put a fence through something, or, you know, a
yes.
wall through something. Um, that's the way Gaia is, and any healthy systems, in my view, and I would say John Fullerton would absolutely agree with this, follows Gaia. We learn from Gaia. We follow her wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's borders is also where you're alluding. Like, we've drawn up, you know, I mean, historically speaking, right? In the world wars, we've just drawn up borders, and maybe I'm speaking also very much for the European part in this,
I think it's more
of
the
getting in there.
European. Yeah, I mean, it's globally, because if it's not a national border, it's still provincial borders. It's still whatever, and often, you know, the view is it within my borders I will make decisions, but your borders really don't mean anything to Gaia. Her rivers flow across borders, her mountain ranges stretch across borders, her, it doesn't make sense from a planetary perspective to consider things. So even if they're different nations, and I mean, there are certain nations in Africa that's realized that migratory animals don't care about the borders either. So what they've done is they've said, okay, the migrations can go across borders, and we'll support that, and we'll make sure those migratory routes are protected. Yeah. And that's the sort of approach. It's a start. It's a wonderful start, but so much more needs to be considered.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking of some of the organic wine growers here in the north of California have this problem. Um, you know, never mind biodynamic, because that is like a really much stricter organic label. But these growers, wine growers, are impacted by the field next door, that where they use all of the pesticides, and then it wanders over because, like you said, they like uh, nature doesn't go like, oh, that's your border, or that's your piece of
Yeah,
land,
yeah,
or
yeah. I'm going
that's
to
your
stop the
field.
wind
Like,
here. I'm going to stop the wind
we'll
here. Yeah.
stop the wind here, and so that all of the pesticides then go over into the organic fields, and then the farmers there are like trying to protect their fields, because they people come in and they test the grapes too. So even worse if you have a biodynamic area or label, right? So this impacts business,
I
like.
think it's even more than that, Dot, because obviously, the way of growing that is create, that uses all these fertilizers, all these insecticides, or is unnatural. It fights Gaia at every stage. Whereas, the organic is trying to support and align with Gaia's wisdom. And I would say, therefore, that, in any sort of situation where you have the levels of industrial farming or the levels of, chemically based farming, whatever it may be, that is destructive. It
Mhm.
might show reasonable results for a little period of time, but as we're finding here in the UK, it's ultimately destructive. And it's therefore you have to use more and more and more and more chemicals, fertilizers, insecticides to get the result you want. That is not sustainable in any sense. And so more and more, there's a realization of this, because that's the result. It's not that, it's not that you try and put a barrier up to stop the wind blowing. It's that you
But
you
I
actually
mean, it's
help
like
educate.
right, but like it's kind of showing how
Yeah,
ludicrous this conversation can get, right? And so you're going
absolutely,
into the next ludicrous element of it, which is the fertilizers, right? Because some of
absolutely.
these fertilizers, the components are mined, and so we're running out of some of those components in the mining, and so now they're going, oh, maybe we can mine that in outer space and then bring it back down to fertilize the fields here. So it's like, okay, but we could also change our model of agriculture, and then we don't need to do that. Um, and so it would actually, at a certain point in time, just going down, this is like making business sense. It's not making business sense.
It's not
So,
making any sense. It's not
no.
making business sense. It's not making health sense. It's not. It really. What the film is showing, and the evidence base is turning all of that, because it's the worldview through which, the lens through which those decisions are made. And it's killing us. It's killing us. It's killing our planetary home. It's completely unsustainable, and it doesn't need to be like that. It truly does not have to be like that. It can be healthy, we're healthy, thrival, but we don't have long. We really have come to the wire on this. And this is why it's so important that I think the message is available now. What does it make us feel? What does it make us choose as we go forward? That's the invitation, and that's the question.
Yes. And it's a big one. It is
And
huge. Like
and yet it's
how.
and yet it's as much as, it is a big one, and it's intimate.
Yes.
It's
Uh-huh.
intimate,
It's a
you know.
yes and. Yeah. So here's another one. Could you elaborate? But I think we have been in this discussion, and you've really shown some, and maybe you want to add to this. Could you elaborate on how regenerative economic principles differ from traditional economic systems and fostering sustainable growth? Now, different all sorts of different economic systems, right? So not just straight out capitalism, but maybe also a hybrid model of that. Then, um, how would you see there being a difference going into these regenerative economic principles to the old model?
Well, first of all, I think regenerative economics is Gaian, planetary economics, healthy systems economics. So what does Gaia do? If you think of an ecosystem, yes, a healthy ecosystem, there are no hierarchies. There's no body, there's no tree making the decision for the whole ecosystem. The ecosystem exists and evolves in a healthy way through multiple levels of communication, multiple relationships of cooperation and collaboration and sometimes competition. We have a system which is all pervasive, which is called capitalism. But the system itself is diseased because capitalism, was first of all based on a concept of selfishness, yeah, rather than cooperation. Secondly, it's based on debt, which the Sharia system is not. But the problem is debt perpetuates itself, it grows. And the capital system is based on compound interest. So that too drives the debt. We're drowning in debt. When an island nation has a cyclone that comes through it, that destroys its livelihoods, its society, goes to somebody like the IMF for money, that money is not given, it is a loan, and that loan bears interest. And there are some African countries where more than half of their GDP is eaten up with debt interest payments. It is utterly unsustainable. So I wrote something with John a while ago on how that could be reset and reformed and moved progressively to regenerative economics. But there is some basic things that we could choose to do. We could choose to forgive national debts. We could choose not to work with compound interest. We could choose to tax stock transactions, a sales tax on stock transactions, because we have a vast, completely destructive trade in stocks that don't do any good for people and planet. Some very basic things. The capital system itself is utterly dysfunctional. What could be healthy in terms of financial flows is unhealthy because it's not just about the flows of products and services anymore. It's about casino gambling. It's about speculation. When we talk about the capital system as though it's somehow, it of itself, with certain things stripped out of it, it could still be a relatively healthy aspect of economics. But when we talk about the economic system and we talk about the capital system, first of all, that is not how Gaia works, and it is utterly dysfunctional at the moment. The issue is, can it be reformed? And it could be, if there was the political will to do so, it could be reformed. Will it be? I don't know. But the point is, if it's not, then it's basically the subject of a breakdown, because it is unsustainable. It cannot sustain. It is terminally ill.
Yeah, okay, the good news.
The good news is there are alternatives. The good news is there are alternatives. And those
Yeah.
alternatives are the sort of alternatives that are starting to be exampled in bioregional initiatives, by organizations and multi-organizations like Mondragon, like others. There are exemplars coming forward that are showing a much much healthier alternatives. And I'm not, as I say, the capital system per se, if we could strip out some of its worst features, and we could do, then it could still at least be supportive through a transition period.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is really resonating with our audience, and there's some heavier questions here too. Is and again, like I feel like we've been having like really diving deep in this conversation, and really grateful to you, Jude, for going here with us. Um, Here we go. What is the meaning and purpose of human existence? This is the starter question. What is the
Okay.
direction of human evolution, and what can we do to help humanity and the earth evolve better? And
Okay.
so I can repeat those, or if you want to take
No,
them one after the
I'm
other.
I'm good. I'm good.
um,
I'm good with all of those. So, okay. Anyone who's watched the film, I hope will appreciate that its message is that our entire universe meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves as a unitive entity, where mind and consciousness isn't what we have, they're what we and the whole world literally are. So as a result of that, we have meaning and purpose. How can we be a part of an innately meaningful and purposeful universe and not have meaning and purpose ourselves? So that is my first point. My second point is that our universe began nearly 14 billion years ago in its simplest form, but the laws of physics meant that it could not just exist, but evolve. So from its initial simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity and individuated awareness. So we are microcosms, we are microcosmic co-creators of not just its meaningful existence, but its purposeful and ongoing evolution. So we're here at the forefront of this journey, of 14 billion years behind us to this point. So this is, it seems to me, our opportunity, our invitation and our opportunity to realize that this is who we are and to appreciate that this is who we can consciously evolve. Because when we awaken to the relationship that we have, not just with each other, but with our planetary home, Gaia, and our entire universe, we can step in to become co-evolutionary partners of that ongoing journey. Now, Gaia's own purpose and progress can continue with us as co-evolutionary partners if we wake up and remember that this is who we really are and enter into a loving relationship, a right relationship with each other and our planetary home. So that is the potential. That is the meaning, the purpose of why we're here, in my view. And it's the direction which we can choose to move to. How we do it is initially, to begin with, waking up to this understanding of the nature of reality. Then we come back to, okay, if I understand that, how can I live my life so I experience that in my life? Whether it's being more in nature, whether it's dancing more and singing more and creating, whatever it is.
Beautiful.
And what is mine to do? And how can I best serve the good of the whole every moment of every day? And when I don't, when I go, oh no, oh, well, be kind. Not just be kind to others, but be kind to yourself. Because this is turbulent and it is a metamorphosis. So it is a transformation. And just, I invite you to be kind to yourselves and everyone and every being and our planetary home. That's what I would suggest. And that's what I invite you to do.
Yeah, this is great because there's another question here, is how can we alleviate the anxiety caused by these situations, right? That, the situations that you were discussing, that we were discussing here, in this I want to say optimistically this transition period, this awkwardness. So that is, you know, singing and dancing and breathing and like you said at the very beginning, you know, it's less about the drive than it is about, you know, the joy of being and expanding into balance and
Mm.
keeping that, you know, learning that model because I mean, you're still in a universe that is guided by the other principles, right? So there is a certain amount of anxiety for holding space and supporting this evolution.
There is and there isn't. I mean,
Great. No, I love
anxiety,
it.
anxiety, it seems to me, has an evolutionary advantage. When it is momentary, if a tiger's running at me, if I don't feel anxiety, then I'll probably get eaten. So anxiety is good, and I run or I whatever I do. But we, it seems again to me, have chronic anxiety where there is so much anxiety all the time, and that anxiety stems from that worldview of separation and what that might mean and the fears that come from that. Also, you know, if you see a child creating something or playing, they're in the moment. They're in the moment. And anyone who's with us today or listening beyond this, I find when I'm creating, when I'm writing or when I'm dancing or singing or whatever, or gardening, I'm in the moment. I don't have time to be anxious. I'm in the moment. It's when I look ahead and think of what potentially could happen. And I don't actually now. I live in the moment. And I live and I love and I'm joyous, or sometimes I'm sad, and sometimes I have other emotions, but they're in the moment. I don't dwell on them and I don't sort of continue on them. So in that sense, a lot of anxiety is projecting forward of things that may or may not happen. The more we can live in the moment, the less naturally, the less our anxiety is. The more we can release the past, the more we can be in the moment, then that anxiety, I would say as a therapist, but also as an experiencer, I would say any level of stress, any level of anxiety diminishes. And I'm not saying it necessarily ever goes completely away. We're human beings. But in my life, I'm very rarely anxious anymore because I've learned over years to live this way. And I just invite people to do that. It's always going to be a journey. It's always going to be a journey of inner and outer discovery.